Ah, the swinging 60s, where the tales of intrigue and darkness danced in the shadows of San Francisco's vibrant streets. Join me today on a journey through the Haight, a place where Charles Manson once roamed, leaving behind a trail of mystery and mayhem. If you've never had a chance to stroll through the Haight, fear not, my friend, for today we traverse those very streets. Our story unfolds from the pages of the Berkeley Tribe, January 1970, a time not long after the family's arrest in 1969. Picture it, Manson in the heart of the Haight, residing on Cole Street. But our tale weaves beyond the known into the devilish corners of Waller Street. The Devil House was a house of devilry, cloaked in homosexuality, cults, priests, attempted murder, and the looming presence of Charles Manson. I embark on a quest to unearth the secrets of this Devil House. And today, my friend, you're along for the ride. We'll visit the very spots that echoed with the footsteps of those entangled in this web of darkness. Names you may recognize if you've delved deep into this Manson case. The journey is captured in recent footage, every frame telling a tale of its own. And as we dive deeper into the narrative, the U.S. federal prison looms in the background. Join me as I walk the haunting corridors alone at night, echoing with the whispers of a bygone era. This, my friend, is not just a stroll down memory lane. It's a plunge into the abyss of a Devil House's secrets, with revelations that may leave you questioning everything you thought you know. I first heard of Charles Manson when I was in U.S. Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in 1964. In the federal prison system, obvious or swishy homosexuals are, after a time, sent to the U.S. Medical Center for Federal Prisoners. This name is a euphemism for the snake pit insane asylum which the joint is. It was there, sometime in 1964, that an inmate arrived, transferred from the federal prison at McNeil Island, Washington. The prisoner was a sweet boy, the name given to boys that attached themselves to older men in the prison system. His name was Richard, and he had been hanging around a convict from West Virginia named Charles Manson. For a time, Manson toyed with Richard, but when he denied his affections, Richard tried to commit suicide. Naturally, he was sent to the snake pit. The federal snake pit is a land of no return for many convicts. Some of the most tragic cases end up there, to spend years in certain backward cells, beaten in body, heart, and soul. Sometimes one can see them walking around the prison's circular track, sometimes alone and sometimes talking excitedly about their misfortunes. They come from numerous federal prison training schools, camps, reformatories, correctional institutions, and penitentiaries. In one sense, the federal snake pit is a cosmopolitan prison. I met Richard in the prison library. For some time, he spoke eagerly about his lost lover, Charles. He said that he believed that Charles will be a great man someday. When I asked why, he replied, because he knows all about magic. Manson got out of McNeil Island Prison in March 1967. At the time he arrived in Haight-Ashbury, I was already there. He hadn't met Susan Atkins yet, and was more or less exploring Haight-Ashbury for what it had to offer. I met him one evening in I Thou Coffee House. I wouldn't really have been interested except that he mentioned that he had just got out of federal prison. We rapped, and I was surprised to discover that he was the guy who had more or less been Richard's friend. Boys aren't where it's at, he told me in front of about 5 others. Out here it has to be girls. You can control girls easier than you can boys. I was talking to a man called Sam Tella at the time about Dostoevsky. I tried to get some response from Charles, but he merely shook his head and then said, "Hey, I know where all that's at. And it's this way. 2 scorpions together would only sting one another to death." He got up and left, and I didn't see him again until 1968, again in Haight-Ashbury. In summer-fall 1968, I got involved in a death cult that had its home in the Haight. I came back to the area after about a year and was staggered to see it dying, turning into a grim underworld of hate and violence. I stayed around to look for Smith, a dropout professor I met during the Summer of Love. My search led me into the Waller Street ashram, which is known was the Devil House. The Devil House people said it was a religious order, and it went by many ancient names, one of them being the Companions of Life, another one being the Final Church of Judgment. The Final Church is the name Manson chose for the church he would eventually found. I found the keen-minded Smith at this house, but it had greatly changed. Before, Smith was agnostic, a cynic, and very bookish man. Now he was repeatedly drunk, almost unable to feed himself. Smith had also been quite a woman chaser. Now he was in the middle of a homosexual religious order, one that didn't allow women to enter the ashram beyond the front transients room. This death cult was led by a strange fiery man about 45. They called him Father P, the 66th. Father P claimed that amongst many things he had an MD, a PhD, and also that he was a magician. There was talk around the ashram that Father P had been chased out of North Carolina for setting fire to the town church, expelled from pre-Castro Cuba, and had recently returned from Damascus, Syria. They accepted me into the ashram as a potential disciple. I was trusted, and I actually was moved by the madness that continuously took place around me. During my stay there, Father P and Smith, along with some others, made references to Charlie, who was down at a movie lot. I never asked much about Charlie, for he seemed less interesting than a person named Sadie, who the Brotherhood decided to bring to trial. On the night of the medieval trial, Charles Manson turned up. He came to the door with a girl who I later recognized as Susan Atkins. She wasn't permitted to enter beyond the crasher's room, and there she stayed until Charles left the next morning. The trial was called because it was claimed by Father P that Sadie had put all Haight-Ashbury under a curse. They would decide whether or not to put Sadie to death for committing crimes against Haight-Ashbury, against nature. Sadie, once a member of the group, but left and made his woman pregnant, a sin according to Father P, and for crimes against Pussycat. Pussycat was Father P's boy. Apparently, Sadie had come back to the ashram one night. Not long after he entered the ashram, a demon jumped into Pussycat's body. He jumped about, breaking windows and in general causing alarm to everyone in the household. Father P would never forgive Sadie for this. Manson came that night, and Smith claimed Charlie was called to sit in on the trial since he too, along with Smith, had been the understudy for Father P. The fact that Manson had gone to girls instead of boys was explained away. Some people were dominated by the yin principle, others by the yang. As long as Charlie doesn't bring his groupies into the holy altar room, he's saved. Manson nodded to me when he entered the house, but said nothing to me. He told Smith that he drove up in a stolen bus, as if to make Smith impressed on how he was doing. He also talked about being his own master soon. Charlie sat most of the time by DK on a dirty mattress. Once in a while, DK would put his hand on Manson's leg, but the latter merely pushed it aside and laughed. Father P was preparing for the holy services. He had put on his brown tunic, got out his religious relics. This was essential for purification before the trial would start. But before Father P got out a few words of Hebrew, Pussycat jumped up and released a scream. "Fuck you, Father P, alias Carl A. Fuck you, you arsonist." Pussycat then jumped upon Smith, who was now the new understudy with Father P. "My eyes! He's trying to scratch out my eyes!" Everyone in the room leaped for Pussycat, who was actually a strong 20-year-old boy. DK, who was the biggest, grabbed Pussycat around the waist, wrestling him to the mattress where he was bound hand and foot. Father P suddenly started running around the room. Father P crying out, "I'm God, I'm Satan, I'm Jesus." Pussycat was making noises on the floor through his gagged mouth. Father P proclaimed him again possessed by Sadie. He sent DK and Manson out to steal holy water from a nearby church. Smith and I were supposed to keep guard over the bound-up, struggling boy. As soon as they re-entered the house, Father P grabbed the holy water, sprinkled it on Pussycat's face. When he became quiet, Father P motioned for him to be unbound. But as soon as the gag was taken from his mouth, Pussycat screamed, "Father P is a rotten devil worshiper." This time, Father P indicated that Manson should help tie him up, which he did. Then the Holy Father ran to his altar, taking from a stolen crucifix. It was a large wooden one. He brought it to Pussycat's face and began beating him, striking the crucifix across his face, blow after blow. I had up to then watched the events at Waller Street House with a curious sense of detachment and disbelief. Seeing Father P beat the tied-up pussycat greatly upset me. Smith had some time before told me that Father P was a master metaphysician and a master game player, but the blood on Pussycat's face made me realize that there were more than games being played at the Devil House. I managed to leave the house, run to the microbus I had lived in, and get out my small tape recorder. I hid it under my coat, placing the microphone up my sleeve. I re-entered the house just as Pussycat was screaming and Father P was promising certain death to Sadie, who, by the way, along with his wife, were somewhat well-publicized long hairs that lived in the Haight. Manson was still in the house that night and was referred to several times in the tape as Charlie. Pussycat wants his hands untied. Smith turned to Father P. "No, no, no," Pussycat screamed. "I just want to go to sleep, man." "Don't untie him," Father P ordered. "You are all witnesses of the fact you beat me with a cross. You beat me with your fist," Pussycat yelled. "Pussycat, don't struggle," Smith replied. Father P, "Satan bear." "No, Sadie," Father P yelled, claiming that Pussycat was no longer in the room, that Sadie had actually entered his body. "No, Sadie, you will not be set free." "Father P, you're Satan's author." "No, Sadie, you will not be set free." "Help! Police!" "Don't set him free. No compassion. It's not for Pussycat. It's a demon. He kicked at the bound boy. Don't set him free. You're a devil. I will not be compassion on Sadie, the evil one, even if he is in my Pussycat's body." "You're a devil, Father P, a true devil. If I've ever seen a devil in my life, it's you." Father P threatened to replace the gag. "If you must die, Sadie will die with you." Everyone in the room was shouting or demanding that something be done, including Manson. He kept asking, "Who's Sadie? Who is he?" DK got a stake and began to carve it. "He must die." Some people came to the door. Pussycat lay moaning from his third beating. "Israel lives in this body." Father P motioned Manson over, whispered something to him, then said, "Sadie, go home. There are so many who love you in Haight-Ashbury, so many diabolical persons. Why don't you take their bodies instead of my Pussycat's?" Then he said it very quietly, "Sadie, go away, please." Then he changed rapidly. His face went red. His mustache jumped up and down. "Sadie, go away, or I will take your body and destroy it with great pain. I will burn it piece by piece. I will chop it up in little pieces." Father P turned to Manson. "A medieval justice must be committed upon Sadie." For some reason, DK got into it with Jude, a person who remained silent, reading a book called The Nazarene. Jude remarked that DK merely wanted to drive the stake through Sadie's heart because you hate his woman, because you hate all women. This upset both Father P and Smith. "Jude, how can you say that about DK? What is this?" Father P seemed surprised that Jude, who so worshipped him, would say anything like this. "That cannot be true. DK likes Charlie. He likes Charlie. And you know how Charlie likes the girls." Jude was being out-yelled. Father P later spoke with Charles Manson on what he was doing. I sat near Smith but could hear their conversation well enough. What appears to be the truth about this room is not so. Manson stared into Father P's eyes and the Holy Father continued. "The state of consciousness of two or more people in such a room is subject to change when one of them is a magician of consciousness. The realities and truth of physical properties," he went on, "are subject to change when there's a question of the consciousness involved. The fact that there is just a chair here alters when a nightmarish quality enters, and even the chair means something else, perhaps even sinister." Charles Manson left early the same morning, going back to Spawn Movie Ranch. Later, I found out that Father P had actually gone down there to see Charlie, although I cannot say whether or not they met at the ranch itself or elsewhere. But I do know that one time I took both Father P and Pussycat to the area of Topanga Canyon where I let them out. They refused to let me take them to their destination or tell me about it, but it was apparently after the death of a member of the final church. I met Sadie after all this, walking in front of the I Thou coffee house. I warned him that some of the people who he knew were out to kill him and his pregnant wife. Sadie told me that he knew about this, and they disappeared from Haight-Ashbury a little while after this. Brooding about all this, I decided to take my tapes to the San Francisco Examiner, a paper at the time I knew nothing about. The Examiner sent out Sam Bloomfield, who sat by me, listening to the tapes. After a while, he got up, left the room. There was a phone in the room, so I picked it up. To my surprise, Bloomfield was on it calling the police. Of course, I got out of there and took with me and kept the piece of paper that Bloomfield had written his name and telephone number on. Not very knowledgeable at the time of what to do with my writing, I took it over to the old Barb and explained it to them. "You've got the essence of the Haight-Ashbury," was Max's rap. He sent me back out to work on it. I wasn't really able to get it done at the time, so I decided I would later turn the material into a novel. It was only to discover that Manson was on these tapes and in those notes that made me again decide to let someone else see these things about the Devil House.